the Ahmadi tradition can be traced back to Mirza Sahib, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could we just get a little bit more of a background, a history of who he is and sort of the timeline of events within his life?
Right. So we believe in Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as being the promised Messiah for Muslims and other faith groups. His mission was to unite humanity to a single belief rather than having multiple different types of beliefs, right? In the Holy Quran. How do we ground it there? That's where Mirza Ghulam Ahmad comes in. So he was told by God that Jesus, peace be upon him, has passed away, and that he himself is the fulfillment of the prophecies of a Messiah.
When would this have been started? When would he have started making those sort of statements?
So this was in 1889.
Okay.
Okay.
And
this is
what area of the globe?
This is Punjab, India area.
Okay.
In India, or Hindustan at that time, there was, this is before Pakistan.
Yeah.
There's a province called Punjab, and in there's a small little hamlet, small town called Qadian. That's where he lived and he was born and raised.
And he was raised as a Muslim?
Yeah, he was raised as a Sunni Muslim. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. His family was Muslim, long line of Muslims. It's not that he became Muslim later, or the family. They've always been Muslim.
Okay.
The city was actually founded to be a hub for Islamic scholars.
Mm-hmm.
Back when his ancestors established the city, it was meant to be a place where scholars can discuss and things. He had, way before he made any claim to messiahship, he had many revelations. Going back to 1865, okay, one of the first revelations he received was at the instance of when his father passed away. Mm. When his father passed away, he wasn't. So Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, he wasn't a worldly person. He was more of a hermit.
Okay. He
stayed in the mosque. He read Islamic literature. He studied. He prayed. He was thankful. Like, he was not inclined towards any worldly thing at all.
Okay.
And his family was worried about him. Because, like, you have to work, you have to do things, right? His father was very worried about him. But their family was, his father was the chieftain of the town.
Okay.
So they were in charge of the town, and, you can call them like nobles, basically, right? In India at that time.
I guess relatively wealthy then?
Not relatively wealthy, but they were, because it was still a small town. It wasn't like a metropolitan, right? Like, they had ancestral land, and people rented and things like that. So, because he was so devoted to his worship, he wasn't inclined towards worldliness. He didn't have income. He didn't have any of those things. So one of the first, when his father passed away, and his father was his main source of income. Okay. So this is way before, like, he was younger at that point, right? So in his mind, he had this fear, you could call it, or like, what am I going to do now, right? And actually, sorry, this isn't the first revelation. This is the second, I would say. When he had this thought, God revealed to him, "Alaysa Allahu bikafin abda," that is Allah not sufficient for his servant? So now you can see in this that there's nothing like, go do this, go do that. It's comforting. Like, don't worry. I've been taking care of you your whole life, and I'll continue to take care of you. This is the type of reassurance Islam promises. This is what keeps it alive. This is what makes it stand out, right? And this was his second revelation, I would say.
What will be the first then?
His first revelation was actually just before this. Prior to his father passing away, actually, I want to make sure I get this right. It was his father or his mother? I believe it was when before his father passed away. He wasn't in the town. He was outside of town. His dad had gotten him a job, forced him to do a job, like, go work, right? So he was working in a different city, and he received the revelation, was samai wa tariq, which means like by the heavens and the star that sets. And immediately the understanding that he received was that my father's going to pass away. That was with that revelation came the understanding. And I believe this is what he mentions as his first revelation.
Okay.
So when he got this revelation, he went home. Right? This is before internet. This is before telephones and all that stuff. So he made his way back to Qadian, and then his father passed away. And then the second revelation he received is when he had this, what am I going to do now? Is God not sufficient for his servant?
Okay, yep.
And that's a message that is in the Quran as well. So all Muslims read this. It's supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to let us know that don't worry about things so much.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in a God that's all powerful, why are you worrying about things, right?
How does a person like this, though, gather a following then?
So that comes much later.
Okay.
So this is why the history is very important, because people don't know that before claiming messiahship, he had already published his revelations. Okay, he had actually published them for more than 23 years.
Okay.
Right. So
when you say publish, what does that exactly mean?
Yeah. So in Islam, there's a criteria for truthfulness. Okay, in terms of your prophetic mission, if you have a prophet, if you're a prophet.
Yeah.
The way it's defined is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a truthful prophet, and his ministry lasted 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
If he's the definition of what a truthful prophet is, then no false person can have a longer ministry than him. So it's a logical thing. Okay? If a false person has a longer ministry than him, then how do you know who's true and false? Right? So there has to be a divine, I don't know what you want to call it, like intervention in the false person's life that would make sure that when you look at him and you look at a truthful prophet, you see, okay, this guy was definitely false. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe he didn't get the following, he didn't live long enough, he didn't. But 23 years is in Islamic literature known as the line of demarcation of what's truthful or not. So from 1865 to 1889, how many years is that?
23.
Right. So he's already past that. And this is when his ministry is starting. So what's happened from 65 to 89? This is the question. So he didn't, while he was always engaged in religious dialogue with people. You see people today, they're on YouTube and they're young and they're having religious conversations and stuff. He was having religious conversations when he was 16, 15, right? And this is before, like he was just having genuine conversations with Christians and Hindus and everything. When his father passed away, a few years later, he had the idea to respond to allegations that were coming upon Islam. This is a very difficult time for Muslims because there was a lot of, today we have a lot of Islamophobia. Back then there wasn't Islamophobia, but there was still a movement against Islam that was coming in from other countries.
Who was ruling that part of India at that time?
This was British India.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was missionaries coming in from Britain, from other lands, and they had the goal of converting India to Christianity. This was what was happening at that time, and many people were converting. Like hundreds and thousands of people were converting at the same time. Also, we were talking about how he's engaged with other groups and he's discussing religion with groups, and the state of Muslims was that they were being targeted by missionaries from other religions, from clergy from other religions. Hindus and Christians were kind of going at it, discussing different things. And that was just the atmosphere that was happening. But there's a third factor there as well, which doesn't get talked about much, but which was the enlightenment that was happening within the country. People were now, because of the British rule, had access to higher education. So they were studying, they were getting masters and PhDs, and they were getting influenced by philosophy a lot. Mm-hmm. And that was also taking a lot of Muslims away from Islam. So when he saw this, and in his mind, Islam was the perfect religion. It had answers, and it was actually very troubling to see Muslims leaving their religion and leaving on really shaky or baseless foundations. Like, it wasn't a good reason to leave, right? If you have a philosophical conflict, resolve it. If there's an attack on your beliefs or principles, look at it deeper. Does it actually stand up, right? And then obviously leaving because someone insults the religion or because it's made to look really inferior. That's not basic. Like, you should have that in-depth knowledge, but the Muslims weren't getting that information from the scholars.
Mm-hmm.
The scholars at that time, the imams at that time, of course not all of them, but the majority of them were not trying to tackle this issue. It wasn't a problem that, okay, these Muslims are leaving Islam. But for him, it was a problem. And because he had spent a lot of time studying the Holy Quran, a point came where he started answering questions that people were asking. So it started off with the Hindus, the Arya Samaj, Arya Samaj and Brahmo. He started answering their allegations. He started having one-on-one debates with them, correspondence with them, and he would print posters and put them up, answering these questions. And this is significant. He didn't just jump in, okay, I'm the Messiah, I'm answering questions. There's a build-up happening.
Yeah.
And he's just going with the flow. There's no real direction in this, right? It's just, okay, this is the issue now, tomorrow this is the issue. So he doesn't tackle Christianity till later. Mm-hmm. He tackles philosophy, he tackles the Hindu religion, and this is what we see in his first book, Brahim. We were talking about this earlier, mm-hmm. which has 5 parts. Part 1 and 2 came out in 1880. And if you read these books, you can tell, oh yeah, we were talking about getting support for books.
Yeah.
Right? As an author, if he wants to print and he doesn't have money, he has to solicit funds from people. So Volume 1 is basically appealing to people who have concern for the state of Islam, have compassion for Muslims, that I'm writing this book to defend Islam, to clarify these allegations that are put against Islamic teachings, and I would like you to support me in this venture. So he's getting subscribers, basically.
Yeah.
Basically, right? Or Patreon type thing. And many Muslims supported him. They said, okay, we're going to give you this much money for this many copies. And that's when you can actually go to a publishing or a printer and say, okay, I want X number, because you have the money to back it up. So he prints volume 1 and 2. And in these volumes, the interesting thing here is his argument is that Islam is a living religion. And the proof of its being a living religion is that God still talks to Muslims. And that's what makes it stand out against other religions. And then to furnish proof for that, or to provide proof, he gives his own revelations. Pages and pages upon his own personal revelations that he hasn't shared with anybody before. Just in his diary, he wrote them down as he received them. But he presents them now as, okay, this is what Islam gives a person access to. This is the type of information you now, if you have a relationship with God and he's a living God, this is how you know what's, this is, how can you say, like a gift that you have. And it makes Islam stand out. So this is before anything. This is before Ahmadiyya as a movement. This is before his messiahship. This is before he started a community. Mm-hmm. This is before any of his claims. But there was no backlash. And that's surprising, because if today the traditional stance is that there's no more revelation, then there should have been backlash immediately when he published volume 1 and 2. So what does that show? There's been a stance change. They've moved the goalposts. As things progressed, they eventually moved the goalposts. When he published volume 1 and 2, there were still Muslims supporting him, which allowed him to publish volume 3. Mm-hmm. If his stance that revelation continues was a problem, it would have been a problem before, long before he claimed anything. So this is very striking, because from a historical point of view, you can't ignore this fact. He wasn't talking to the average Muslim. These books are scholarly books. He was talking to the philosophers. He was talking to the scholars, the imams, using the ideas prevalent at that time to show how Islam does not fall into these traps. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he's talking to the average person. He's talking to learned Muslims, and they're not, except for a few voices that said you shouldn't publish your revelations. No one said, what the heck is this? There's no revelation in Islam, right? The Prophet is the last prophet. Where are you coming up with this stuff? That didn't happen. And this is years before he made a claim. So today, for that to be the stance that there's no more revelation, therefore Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is wrong, it can't work. That's literally changing the goalposts, right? So now, a point comes when he makes the claim to be the mujaddid of Islam. And when Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Islam was alive, this is what he told people. This is my claim. If you want to inquire about it, he's already printing books at this point.
Yeah.
This is later on. So 1890 is when he made his claim to messiahship. And he thoroughly goes through all the details, right?
Thank you for listening to that interview clip. If you enjoyed it and you want to listen to full interviews and learn more about religion, not just from academia, but from people who actually believe in these religions, subscribe to this podcast. And as always, friends, go out there and light the world yourselves.